Welcome to today's deep dive. I'm
Oh.
so glad you're joining us because today our mission is to unpack this really fascinating, honestly kind of shocking intersection of art, international relations, and, real human stakes.
Yeah, it's a heavy one, but so important, especially if you're just starting to look into how complex global concepts actually play out in the real world.
Exactly. And the foundation for our conversation today is this incredible research presentation by Edmund Chow. He looks into cultural practices and conflict zones, and, well, he reveals some things that completely upend how we think about international art.
He really does. It's the kind of research that makes you question everything you thought you knew about cultural exchange.
Right. So, to start, I want you to imagine a scene. Picture yourself in London. It's May 2012, and you're standing inside the iconic Globe Theatre.
Oh, wow, yeah. The Cultural Olympiad.
Yes, exactly. It's the Cultural Olympiad. The energy in the room is just electric. It's a packed house, and you are part of this massive, deafening standing ovation.
Everyone is on their feet.
Everyone. And on stage is this theater troupe. They've flown all the way from Afghanistan to perform Shakespeare. And in that moment, as an audience member, you're probably feeling this, ultimate triumph of global unity.
Right, you're feeling good about
You
it.
feel great. You're celebrating these performers, bridging this massive cultural divide. It feels like this perfect, uncomplicated moment of shared humanity.
But, okay, let's unpack this, because I want to use an analogy here. Think about that standing ovation, when you blindly share, or like one of those inspiring viral posts on social media.
Oh, yeah, like the ones with the really uplifting music.
Exactly. You share it because it feels good, but you have literally no idea about the incredibly dark backstory of how that video was actually made.
Which brings us to the pivot. Because that beautiful, triumphant moment at the Globe Theatre, it was actually masking a terrifying, literal life-and-death crisis for the performers on that stage.
And that's the through line we're exploring today. How foreign policy goals, specifically when they're funneled through something like theater, have very real, sometimes incredibly dangerous impacts on local Afghan communities.
Yeah, the contrast is it's jarring. Because if we walk away from that cheering crowd,
Right.
and we step directly backstage immediately following the performance, that whole beautiful narrative just collapses.
It shatters completely. Chow was there, he went backstage, and the reality he documented is just, well, it's harrowing.
So tell us about the specific incident he talks about. What was happening backstage?
So while the audience is out there cheering, backstage, one of the lead Afghan actresses is sobbing uncontrollably. I mean, she is in a state of absolute terror.
Or what? What happened?
Okay, so the British Council sponsored this Shakespearean play, right, featuring these Afghan actors. And in one scene, a man hugs a woman.
Okay.
And crucially, the woman is not his wife.
Wait, a hug. That's it.
That's it. A simple, scripted hug. To a London audience in 2012, that gesture is practically invisible. It doesn't register as anything.
It's just standard stage directions.
Exactly, completely harmless. But in conservative Afghanistan, that is deeply inappropriate.
Right, because you have to remember, the geographic illusion of the theater, the idea that for 2 hours everyone is just, a citizen of the globe, that breaks down the second the curtain falls.
Because they have to go home. They have to get on a plane and fly back to Kabul.
And she was terrified.
Terrified. She told Chow she was completely convinced that if she returned to Afghanistan after doing this play, she would be beheaded.
Beheaded over a stage hug. That is it's chilling.
So what did the funders say? The British Council, they paid for this, right? Did they step in to protect her?
This is where it gets really dark. When she took her fear to them, when she made it clear she felt her life was in danger, their response was basically, "We've already paid you the money. Do with it yourself."
Wait, really? They just brushed her off like that?
Yeah, we paid you. Handle it. Wow. I have to push back on that because we always hear this narrative that art is a universally safe space, right? That it's this protected bubble. How does a simple scripted hug transform from an artistic gesture into a literal death sentence? And how can a funder just wash their hands of it?
What's fascinating here is how Western funding bodies often view these projects. It's completely transactional.
Like buying a product.
Exactly. They are exchanging money for a performance. And in doing that, they completely ignore the lived reality and the physical safety of the local Afghan performers they claim to be supporting.
It's like treating her terror like a customer service complaint after the return window has closed. The performance was delivered, so the transaction is done.
Right. And to really understand why this happens, we have to look at the systemic reason this play was put on in the first place. Like, why is a Western organization funding Shakespeare for Afghan actors at all?
Right, which brings us to the mechanics of international relations, because this isn't just about art, is it?
Not at all. It's about a concept called cultural diplomacy.
Okay, let's break that down for the listeners. What exactly is cultural diplomacy?
So, in international relations, you have hard power,
Yeah.
which is, tanks, military force, economic sanctions, coercion.
Forcing people to do what you want.
Exactly. But then you have soft power. And soft power is the ability to attract and co-opt. You shape the preferences of others through appeal.
So cultural diplomacy is the tool they use to get that soft power.
Exactly. It's when non-government organizations or NGOs and cultural institutions go into post-conflict societies, ostensibly to rebuild.
But they aren't just building, like, water treatment plants or roads.
Right, they are rebuilding cultural infrastructure. They fund art, music, theater, and on paper, it's framed as healing a war-torn society. But structurally, it's a calculated exercise in soft power.
Which means the play is never just a play.
Never. The funding comes with built-in expectations of what the art should look like and what values it should project.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Think of soft power in this context like a cultural Trojan horse.
Oh, I like that. A Trojan horse.
Right, because it looks like this beautiful gift of art and infrastructure and funding, but hidden inside that horse are imported Western cultural norms.
Like the onstage hug between unmarried people.
Exactly. And once that horse is inside the gates and the performance happens, those imported norms spill out. But then the funders close the gates and fly back to London, leaving the local community to deal with the danger they just smuggled in.
That analogy is perfect because it highlights the massive power imbalance. Using theater to promote culture is not a neutral act. When it's wielded without understanding, the funder gets all the good PR.
And the local actors take on all the physical risk.
100%. And this is the scope of Edmund Cho's research. He examines 9 specific theater performances using these really fascinating interdisciplinary lenses.
Let's talk about those lenses, because looking at this from different academic angles really clarifies what's happening.
Yeah, so he uses cultural studies, performance studies, post-colonial studies, and international relations.
Okay, so if we take performance studies, we're just looking at the physical blocking.
Yeah.
Two bodies connecting in space.
Right, just a physical movement. But then you apply the cultural studies lens, and that meaning fractures. In London, it's a standard embrace. In Kabul, it's a severe breach of moral code.
And then the international relations lens asks, well, why did the UK pay for those two bodies to connect?
Exactly. And the answer is that showcasing a modernized, liberalized Afghan theater troupe serves their foreign policy narrative. It shows that Western intervention is working.
It's a metric of success for their soft power.
Which brings us to the most revealing lens, I think, post-colonial studies.
Right, examining the lingering power structures. Because even if formal empires are gone, financial dominance still dictates the terms.
Absolutely. The funder imposes their cultural standards onto a vulnerable population under the guise of helping them. They extract a performance that serves their own agenda, regardless of what it costs the locals.
It's like coercion masked as charity. Which brings us to the audience's role in all of this. Because if the system is broken, who is actually responsible?
Well, this is where Chow had a really profound realization. Let's go back to the Globe Theater, to that standing ovation.
Right, the cheering crowd.
Chow realized that as an audience member, standing there and cheering them on, he was indirectly supporting a life and death situation.
Wow, because he's validating the transaction.
Yes, uncritical audiences and culturally insensitive institutions are actually complicit in what he calls the production of violence against these communities.
The production of violence. That is a heavy term. Let's make sure that's clear. We usually think of violence as a direct physical act, right? Like a bombing or a shooting.
Right, but structural violence occurs when systems, policies, and funding requirements put people in harm's way.
So by demanding a performance that violates local safety protocols, the funding institutions are structurally producing violence.
And the audience is applauding it. The applause is the ultimate metric of success. When the British Council writes their grant reports, they point to that standing ovation as proof that their cultural intervention worked.
So by clapping for a culturally insensitive performance, the audience is basically telling the funders, yes, we want this, keep doing it.
Exactly. We are part of the supply chain.
Okay, so what does this all mean for the future? I mean, if the very act of exporting culture can cause harm, can foreign policy ever successfully utilize cultural diplomacy without paralyzing the programs altogether? Are we destined to just cause harm when we try to help?
Well, Chow proposes a solution. He calls it a culturally sensitive methodology.
Okay. What does that actually look like in practice? Because it sounds great in theory, but governments want deliverables. They want metrics.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, a culturally sensitive methodology means prioritizing the safety and cultural context of local communities over the desires of the funding institutions.
So like co-creation from the start.
Yes. It means changing how success is measured. Instead of saying, we'll fund you to produce a Western classic using our stage directions, you say, we will fund you to explore a theme relevant to your society, and you have final authority on the script.
But wouldn't that cause friction? I mean, Western taxpayers are footing the bill. They want to see those progressive themes clearly on stage.
It definitely causes friction. Relinquishing control is hard, but it's the only way to do ethical cultural diplomacy.
Right, because it allows local directors to just cut the physical danger out completely, like just omit the hug.
Exactly. They can still explore complex themes, but they use local idioms. Maybe they use traditional poetry or allegory to make the point to a local audience without triggering a violent backlash.
So the art might look different, maybe less accessible to a Western audience at the Globe Theater, but it would be infinitely safer for the Afghan audience.
Yes. The physical and cultural safety of the local population has to be the absolute baseline requirement, not an afterthought you deal with once the check clears.
I mean, if a program is paralyzed because it's forced to prioritize the safety of the people it employs, then that program was probably inherently exploitative to begin with.
Exactly. Knowledge in art must be applied ethically. True cultural diplomacy can't be a one-way street. You have to actually listen to the local community and trust their expertise on their own survival.
That is such a crucial takeaway. Okay, we have covered some incredible ground today. We started out inside the walls of the London Globe Theater, swept up in this standing ovation for an Afghan theater troupe.
And then we peeled back the layers of that triumphant moment to reveal a terrified actress bracing for a literal death sentence.
Right. And we examined how theater is utilized as this calculated instrument of soft power, functioning as a cultural Trojan horse that smuggles in imported norms at the expense of local safety.
We broke down the mechanics of how transactional funding models, driven by foreign policy goals, create this production of violence.
And we looked at the difficult but completely necessary logistical shifts required to implement a culturally sensitive methodology, one that prioritizes human life over diplomatic metrics.
It's heavy, but it's essential to understand if we want to engage ethically with global art.
It really is. And I think the biggest takeaway is confronting the uncomfortable reality of our own complicity as an audience. The next time you watch an international documentary or see a foreign troupe perform or consume any piece of global art funded by a Western institution,
Yeah.
take a moment to look past the performance.
Yeah, ask yourself, who wrote the check for this stage?
Right. What metrics are they trying to satisfy? And who is taking the physical, cultural, or social risk to actually perform it?
Because the true narrative of cultural exchange rarely happens under the stage lights. It happens in the quiet negotiations of power, funding, and survival that we as the audience are just conditioned to ignore.
Absolutely. Which leaves us with a final, rather provocative thought to mull over. We discuss how a standing ovation serves as the ultimate metric of success for a soft power initiative.
Right.
But if our version of soft power relies on asking local artists in post-conflict zones to risk their lives just to perform our cultural values back at us, who is really benefiting from this exchange?
Is the local community receiving the supposed help?
Or is it the Western audience, sitting comfortably in a wooden theater, purchasing the feeling of having helped? Something to think about. Thanks for diving deep with us today.